In May 1940, as German tanks stormed across the Dutch border, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill sent an offer of asylum to the exiled German Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm II, who had fled Germany after World War I and was living in the Netherlands. Wilhelm denied, preferring to remain at his residence Hausdorn, where he was later placed under permanent Wehrmacht guard until his death in 1941. But why did the British Prime Minister send an offer of asylum to a German emperor, especially Churchill, who had seen both command and frontline action during the First World War, fighting with the Royal Scots Fusiliers on the Western Front for some 6 months against the Kaiser's army? Well, let us wind the clock right back. In 1891, Churchill, then 16 years old, went to see the Kaiser in London, who was visiting his grandmother, Queen Victoria. Churchill seemed to be quite in awe of Wilhelm and wrote to a friend excitedly about the Kaiser's uniform. He wrote, "I must describe the Emperor's uniform, a helmet of bright brass surmounted by a white eagle nearly 6 inches high, a polished steel cuirass and a perfectly white uniform with high boots." There were some anxieties about the role Germany might play in Europe at the time as a new state, but for Churchill it seemed to be an exciting object of curiosity, and the militaristic Kaiser certainly caught the young man's attention, who was an avid monarchist after all. Then in 1906, a 32-year-old Churchill met the Kaiser in person while he was serving as Under-Secretary of the State for the colonies. The Kaiser had invited Churchill to Germany to observe military demonstrations and parades which were occurring near the city of Breslau, now in Poland. At the demonstrations, Churchill reported that he was impressed by the rigorous discipline of the German army, but was disappointed by their lack of appreciation for modern weaponry, which in only less than a decade would see their debut during the First World War. The Kaiser seems to have agreed, and in the years following, the German army would actually change their focus and begin to incorporate these new technologies into their ranks. It would be during these years that the Kaiser also pushed to dramatically increase the size of the German navy so as to rival Britain's dominating Royal Navy, with the end goal of being able to use it as a political bargaining chip to sway Britain to its will. A decision cited by many historians as being one of the Kaiser's many reckless political decisions that contributed to the start of the Great War, and one that Churchill was undoubtedly not a fan of. However, after returning to England in 1906, most of Churchill's writings were once again about the Kaiser's uniform and regalia, but did also describe him as, quote, very friendly and certainly a most fascinating personality. Churchill seemed to make enough of an impression upon Wilhelm that the Kaiser asked to see him multiple times in the following years, including when meeting Churchill's maternal aunt the year later. They also met in 1909, largely for the same reasons, and continued to get along very well, and if Churchill's opinions on Wilhelm had been impacted by the Kaiser's debacle the previous year in the Daily Telegraph, he certainly didn't show it. And if you're interested in what the 1908 Daily Telegraph affair was, I'll go through it quickly now. Essentially, the Telegraph published what appeared to be an interview with Wilhelm, conducted the year before in 1907, when it was actually reworked notes of a British Army officer of conversations he had had with the Kaiser. Wilhelm supposedly approved it for publication, but passed it down to his Chancellor and Foreign Ministry, neither of which took the time to read it. The notes went as follows. The Kaiser said, quote, "You English are mad, mad, mad as March hares. What has come over you that you are so completely given over to suspicions quite unworthy of a great nation? What more can I do than I have done? I declared with all the emphasis at my command in my speech at Guildhall that my heart is set upon peace, and that it is one of my dearest wishes to live on the best of terms with England. Have I ever been false to my word? Falsehood and prevarication are alien to my nature. My actions ought to speak for themselves, but you listen not to them, but to those who misinterpret and distort them. That is a personal insult which I feel and resent." Wilhelm had seen the interview as an opportunity to promote his views and ideas on Anglo-German friendship, but due to his emotional outbursts during the course of the interview, he ended up further alienating not only the British, but also the French, Russians, and Japanese. Churchill's opinions on Germany changed pretty dramatically after the Agadir crisis in 1911, which involved the deployment of German naval assets to challenge the French in Morocco and forced the Royal Navy into standby. These more aggressive actions pushed Churchill into now viewing Germany as a serious threat, and he begins, as he is now Home Secretary, pushing for British naval modernisation to retain their supremacy and meet a potential German threat. The alliances that will help to set the stage for the coming World War are solidifying, and the next year in 1911, Churchill makes some pretty blunt statements about the naval race while in Glasgow, arguing for a larger British navy and against a larger German navy. Just some of what he said includes, quote, "The purposes of British naval power are essentially defensive. We have no thoughts, and we have never had any thoughts of aggression, and we attribute no such thoughts to other great powers." There is, however, this difference between the British naval power and the naval power of the great and friendly empire, and I trust it may long remain the great and friendly empire, of Germany. The British Navy is to us a necessity, and from some points of view, the German Navy is to them more in the nature of a luxury. Our naval power involves British existence. It is existence to us, it is expansion to them. We cannot menace the peace of a single continental hamlet, no matter how great and supreme our navy may become. But on the other hand, the whole fortunes of our race and empire, the whole treasure accumulated during so many centuries of sacrifice and achievement, would perish and be swept utterly away if our naval supremacy were to be impaired. It is the British Navy which makes Great Britain a great power, but Germany was a great power respected and honoured all over the world before she had a single ship. Thus we shall make it clear that other naval powers, instead of overtaking us by additional efforts, will only be more outdistanced in consequence of the measures which we ourselves shall take. This is essentially saying that British existence and the British way of life depends on having the strongest navy in the world, and that they will not let that be impaired by Germany's growing naval power, and so they will grow their navy, modernise their navy, so as to make it so supreme that Germany cannot challenge it. The Kaiser demands an apology for this, but Churchill does not offer one. Then, of course, World War I breaks out, and unsurprisingly, no one in Britain is a fan of the Kaiser, and certainly not Churchill. When the war ends, the November Revolution happens, and Wilhelm flees to the Netherlands and lives in exile after his abdication. Following World War I, Churchill writes in 1924 an article in Cosmopolitan about his time with the Kaiser, and seems to speak more or less admirably of him, possibly because he feels badly about the war's outcome having deposed the German royal family, considering he is a great fan of monarchy and does not like the Treaty of Versailles. Churchill at the end of the war described the Kaiser's escape from Germany pretty woefully when he imagined him, quote, "A broken man sits hunched in a railway carriage, hour after hour, at a Dutch frontier station awaiting permission to escape as a refugee." Churchill by this point then definitely sees the Kaiser as a tragic figure at this point and resented the harsh nature of the Treaty of Versailles and the overthrow of the German monarchy. The Kaiser and King George were first cousins after all, despite the British king describing Wilhelm as, quote, "the greatest criminal in history." Leaders after World War I commented that it was the war to end all wars. Wilhelm said it was the peace to end all peace. And he saw his words come true as the Nazi blitzkrieg operation roared throughout Europe. Then, as German tanks rolled across the border of the Netherlands in 1940, the Dutch royal family fled to Britain. Now as Prime Minister, Winston Churchill also offered Kaiser Wilhelm sanctuary and asylum in England, which he refused. He lived his remaining time as a prisoner in his own house at Doorn, with a Gestapo guard at the gates with orders from Hitler that officers of the German army were not to be allowed in to see him. To his delight, though, some did smuggle themselves in by backways to talk to him about the old times. The 82-year-old Kaiser died quietly on the 4th of June 1941, but both Germany and Britain were much too preoccupied with the grim activities of World War II for it to become a huge story. Hitler wanted to give the old Kaiser a state funeral in Berlin, with himself acting as heir apparent for propaganda purposes, but even he was not able to override Wilhelm's orders that his body should not be returned to Germany until the monarchy was restored. However, Hitler did permit the last emperor of the Germans to be buried with full military honours, but ignored his other demand that there should be no Nazi symbolism at his funeral, which was adorned with swastikas. Wilhelm was buried in a tomb at Haus Dorn, which has since become a place of pilgrimage for German monarchists, who gather there every year on the anniversary of his death to pay their homage to the last German emperor. Churchill made no public statement about Wilhelm's death, but if his memoirs are anything to go by, it is likely that he felt some pity for the former German emperor that he used to admire so much before the fury of World War I, but we will never know for sure. Thank you very much for watching. Do let me know what you thought of this video in the comments below, and tell me if you like these history videos. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.